And we're live. What's going on, brother?
How you doing? How you doing? Good.
What's
Good to
happening?
be
What's
on.
happening? Definitely.
Much.
Pat Lane, the Black Bruce Wayne, you know what I'm saying? AKA the real Adam Coleman, teaming up with my man, Alex McElroy. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
sir.
Pastor Alex McElroy, man. I can't leave that pastor part out there, bro.
No, it's all good, man.
The thing of it is, man, see in the black church, man, titles is everything, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not everything. I don't want to disparage unnecessarily, but you got to get them titles right though. You got to make sure if somebody's a bishop, you can't demote them. You know what I'm saying, to a pastor or evangelist. You got to make sure that they, you know what I'm saying, you refer to them, correctly. You got to come correct, man. So
yeah.
So okay, we got Miss Titus in the building. What's happening? All right. Got her in the building. So we got.
I can't see how much.
Yeah. So here's what I'm gonna try to do. Now we talked about it earlier. Before we kind of really dig in, I'm gonna try to see if I can share this link, and then do like a watch party. You know what I'm saying? Converse Contender was happening. MJ Jackson was happening. Was good. And I've never actually, I've never tried doing that before. I've never tried doing the whole send the link thing. So if anybody knows how to do that, like maybe just put it in the chat right quick. Like give me a quick tutorial, and then we're gonna get started. But I'm trying to figure out where's the link that I would even share. I don't even know. I don't
know either. I'm gonna try to do it on my end. Let me see.
Yeah, well, you know what? Maybe I could try it from my phone. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, bear with us, y'all. Like, I'm new to the whole, streaming game. You know what I'm saying? I got about like another month that I can use that excuse, and then after that, I can't be messing up. I can't be messing up. So okay, I see myself here. I'm gonna try to share this on Facebook, and then do like a watch party, which I've never done before. But we will see what happens. How y'all feeling out there, man? MJ, Converse Contender, Miss Titus, how y'all feeling? Y'all doing all right? Can y'all hear us okay and all that kind of stuff before we kind of really get it in? Give me like a number one, numero uno, if you can hear me. Anybody? Okay. And my next question is going to be: is the picture clear enough to where you can see I haven't had an edge up in a while? That's going to be my next question. I hope the answer is no. I might have to cut like this light above me off, to make sure I don't be out here looking dusty, man. I can't be doing that. I definitely can't be doing that.
Nah, you good.
So I'm sharing this link, and I'm gonna see what happens. I don't even know. We're trying to make some magic right here, man. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Crystal clear. Oh, I don't know if that's the audio or that's the video to where you can see my non-edge up. So I'm feeling kind of nervous right now. I'm just gonna say it's audio, so I won't be sitting here looking like self-conscious the whole time. So we'll just go with that. We're gonna go with that. Anyway, Alex, let's go ahead and get started, man. How you feeling over there, bro?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. So we've been talking about doing this live for like 3 months, bro. Like for real. We talked about doing this, Jake, like literally like 3 months ago, dog. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you had some things going on. Just had a baby. I had some things going on. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. So you've been on the show before, though. So, I mean, if anybody hasn't checked that out, I mean, definitely go back and check out the Alex McElroy episode on the Tru-ID podcast. D New in the building. What's happening? So yeah, man. So talk to us a little bit, man. It's been a little while since you was on the Tru-ID podcast, bro. Like, what's been happening with you?
Well, it's been a hectic day today, but
wait a minute. I don't want to cut you off, but okay. I just got to share this. Right now in the chat room, we have one of the top 3, possibly strong possibility, number 1 lyricist I've ever met in my lifetime. A man by the name of Ant Chambers. You know what I'm saying? We had some stuff, man. Matter of fact, when I put this podcast up, I put this episode up, I might have to post one of our old songs, brother, we did together. My man Anthony Chambers is without question, I'm saying one of the illest lyricists I've ever met in my life. Top 3 all time. You know what I'm saying? So we got a legend. We got a legend in the chat room right now. He might drop bars in the chat. I don't know. Anything can happen. Anything can happen on his YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? So
yes, sir.
Shout out to my man Chambers. What's good, Chambers, man? What's happening with you, bro? Oh man. My fault, man. I cut you off, man. I had to acknowledge.
Hey, it's all good.
I had to do that, man. So let's start over. You're saying what's been happening since you was last on the Tru-ID podcast, man?
Yeah, so I think we did the last one before my second conference. So I did that conference. I'm working on my next one next year. So I'll give you updates once it's solidified, location and date. But I'm getting my master's right now in apologetics. So that's a lot. But in addition to working, in addition to being a father and a husband and all that, so a couple other part-time jobs, and I'm traveling and speaking, and so it's good stuff. But it's
grind, bro. You on that grind, man. So what? Are you in Biola? Is that right?
Liberty.
Oh, Liberty. Okay, cool. Around here. Yeah, cool. So you said you're getting the master's in apologetics. How far along are you in that?
I finished my first semester next week. First 4 classes done. So I'm doing, full time, which is a lot of reading. But I really enjoyed, especially, and we'll get into it as we go today, because actually some stuff I was reading this week, class I'm taking called History of Apologetics, where I'm literally reading the original works of every apologist from the first century to present day. Now, not every apologist, but some multiple apologists from every era, from the patristic era to the Middle Ages to.
So you going back to like Justin Martyr, Tertullian would fall in that category, maybe.
Absolutely, Irenaeus, all of them, and then up through Aquinas, Augustine, Aquinas, Benjamin Warfield, C.S. Lewis, all these different ones. So, it's a lot, but
yeah, I'm telling you right now, like you digging into Aquinas, I'm telling you straight up, anybody who understands Thomism, hey, hats off. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I hear these Thomistic arguments that, so if anybody who's not familiar with Thomism, you have Thomas Aquinas, you know, who's really big. He's big in apologetics anyway, but particularly in the Catholic side of the house. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he was an apologist, great thinker. I mean, he's literally considered one of the greatest thinkers of all time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Along with Augustine and some of the other names that you threw out there. But you have Thomism, which is his brand, not brand maybe, but just his kind of way of working through certain theological issues and arguments for the faith and evidence for the existence of God and things like that. It's very complex. It's a lot of moving parts. You know what I'm saying? So I say to anybody. People ask me all the time, like, what do I think about Thomism? I'm like, honestly, I don't know if I'm smart enough to really even agree or disagree. I don't know if the argument's well enough to do that.
That's not even the hardest one, though, man. I actually I posted something. I was reading Anselm, and I just put a meme up of a guy throwing a book on the floor, because you talk about Thomas Aquinas. It's like I got done reading Anselm and his ontological argument.
Sure.
And I was like, what in the world did I just read? You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's real, yo. That's real. I'm saying what's up to people in the chat instead of like stopping the conversation every time. Just maybe I can't do that to everybody, but I see my man Carl Crusell came in. I see Beatrice Wells in the building. D New in the building. I think I shouted her out. Love having you on here, man. Appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, Anselm, the ontological argument, it makes sense to me. You know what I'm saying? I know there's some objections out there that, I don't see the strength of him, but I mean, I think his ontological argument is pretty powerful, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of great stuff out there, man. You definitely digging in the crates, man. Definitely digging in the crates. Yeah. So at this point, I guess you're still pretty early in the game, but is there anything that you've kind of come across, in your studies thus far, kind of going back to the OGs of apologetics? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you've come across that's kind of maybe changed your perspective on arguments that you had been using for the existence of God, or has it kind of like broadened your understanding, anything like that?
Not really, because it's a little different for me, because I came into my master's already well well learned in a lot of the arguments, and having been able to be taught by some of the greats, RZIM Ministries and Frank Turek and Jim Warner Wallace and these guys. And so I kind of had already looked at some other things, and it was interesting. What was interesting, or what is interesting, is being able to read the original works, which I've read some of, but not in totality. I had a lot of writing in the margin when I was reading through Calvin. Just me and him having a conversation. But I do like some things he says. And so I don't know if I've changed, like a theological perspective per se, but I'm open to growing. And I think that's the healthiest place to be. I have read some things that I just hadn't thought of before. Some ways of expressing certain things. So y'all see that at the next conference.
Okay, bro. All right, I feel you. Well, and the thing, man, is one thing I think about is, I say for people like myself, you know what I mean? And maybe this is most people, I'm not really sure. But like when you really discover apologetics, or the light bulb comes on, maybe you're aware of it, but the light bulb comes on, shout out to Devin Harris, what's happening. When that light bulb comes on, that there's all these different defenses of the faith, I guess, like, depending on where your starting point is, I think a lot of times it's going to determine the approach that you take to apologetics. So if you start out, maybe studying some precept, if that's your first encounter, then I think sometimes that's going to kind of steer you. Or if you start out with William Lane Craig, or if you start out with Robert Zacharias, it's going to kind of, steer your path in terms of how you, engage, apologetics. But I think what's cool is, has been my experience. Like, I think you kind of have that thing where you just like really dive in and you just eating up everything, what I mean? Like a buffet type of situation. And then after a while, you're able to kind of sit back and you kind of have a better view of what's out there. And you can then start to kind of like piece together, the puzzle of your overall apologetics perspective. I'm saying, how you understand the biblical worldview. You know what I'm saying? And what arguments you tend to, get into and things like that. So I think I encourage people, I'm saying, don't get hung up. Now, I agree, Converse contender. I do think that the modal ontological arguments, and I assume you mean referring to Alvin Plantinga. And that's the version of it that I'm most familiar with. You know what I'm saying? But so I think that's what he's referring to. But yeah, I agree that's a more sound version. Anyway, I encourage people to really just, dive in and just kind of take advantage of all the resources out there. And even if you come across arguments for God's existence, or just different perspectives that you disagree with, you still end up enhancing your overall perspective, and you're able to kind of really sharpen, those critical thinking skills, I think.
Absolutely. One of the things I tell people all the time is, especially as a starting point when I'm either giving a talk or starting the Q&A section, especially, is when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. And how do we do that? Now, if he's given us a mind to use, and and some of us, the way our mind works, we're not comfortable in the quote unquote typical worship service, at least not only that, we can have that, but it can't just be that. And so how do we engage our mind? And as we're going to talk about today, why must we? Because there's people out there in the world, there's people in your sphere of influence, there's people in your family, at your job, there's people everywhere. They're thinking these things through on the opposite spectrum of God altogether. So one thing I've been really into reading is the internal, we'll call them debates, between different apologists of different eras, and how some were more, we don't need, when the age of reason and rationalism came up, they were like, well, we don't need that. We just need the Holy Spirit. And we see some of that today, right? It's the same debate. It's just 400 years later. And so, but my fear is, well, we'll get into that, as I say, but my fear is if we as a totality of our body don't address the totality of the person or the people that are in our spheres of influence, and specifically in our churches, we're going to end up writing them off, losing them, or making them feel as though there's not substantive answers in the Christian worldview.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I definitely want to get back into that. I'm actually trying to bring up this picture here. But before I do that, man, shout out to my man Chambers. I don't know if you really, I try to shout out everybody who does the super chat. You know, it just occurred to me, maybe some people don't like that. I don't even know, but shout out to him anyway. I already said it now. So shout out to my man Chambers for the super chat. You know, it's definitely appreciated. Your boy is broke, y'all. You know what I'm saying? I need that diaper money, man. I might just start doing like them 8-hour lives. You know what I'm saying? Like they do in the concert community, man. You know, let me stop. I'm joking. That was a joke. that was a joke. God is good. Anyway, I'm trying to bring up this photo because I was just at my parents' crib for Thanksgiving, and I released here we go. I released a video not too long ago where I was talking about the first apologetics book like my dad I ever had, that my dad gave me. Let me see if I can share my screen right quick because I got a picture of it. Let me see. I bring y'all into my childhood a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
See. Boom. Here we go. Can y'all see that? I think they can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this book right here, this is actually, my dad bought me this book. I mentioned it probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I released a video where I was talking about how when I was in 9th grade, I had a professor who pushed me. I was, he had just finished talking about evolution. At the end of class, I raised my hand. I'm like, hey, isn't evolution just a theory? Quite frankly, at the time, I don't even know why I asked the question. It just popped up, you know what I mean? I really have no idea because I wasn't into apologetics at the time, but I just asked the question, and he literally came from behind his desk and pushed me, you know what I'm saying? Like right in the chest, you know what I'm saying? It's like, he told me, don't you ever ask that question again, in my class. And so, before I got to college, my dad, he bought me this book right here. You know what I'm saying? I just took a picture of it this past Thanksgiving. And, so by the time I got to college, I was already getting, tooled up, you know what I'm saying? So I was, known as a debater in college. That's just what I did, but I'm just saying that to say that, we have to be about that life. You know what I'm saying? We got to be about that life as far as equipping our kids, you know what I'm saying? With the stuff that we're talking about. It's like what you're saying doesn't just apply to adults. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What you're saying as far as, just really engaging, God with everything, including the mind, that's not just something for grown folk. You know what I'm saying? That's something for everybody. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we need to be mindful of that, man. But so it just kind of made me think about that when you was talking. So now we had a conversation, actually maybe along those lines. This might be a good segue. We had a conversation maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And actually it's something that we've been talking about ongoing anyway.
Yeah.
The apologetics, man. I'm just gonna pitch you the question. You know what I'm saying? Okay. What would you say? Let me take this off the screen here. Boom. So, we titled this, we need apologetics for a reason, and you share some experiences that you had and some things that maybe would happen within your circle that really prompted you just kind of be even more on alert in terms of how and why we need apologetics. Like just share it with the audience, man. Just kind of, open that up, man. We just two dudes talking, just, share with the people like what you've been seeing, man. And, as to why we need it, bro.
Yeah. Okay. And so I need everybody, because y'all don't know me, but hear my heart. Because whatever I share is in no way to denigrate any person, or definitely not to denigrate the church or any organization or denomination. And I say this as a pastor, because I'm a pastor first. Well, I'll say like this: God's put me in some really unique situations, especially recently, especially this year, where I've had opportunities to speak and teach apologetics in environments where that's not normally. I just a couple weeks ago, I was speaking at a worship conference. It's not typically the place where the apologist gets invited, but the pastor was awesome. I connected with him prior to that, and we connected on some other stuff. And he's like, "No, man, I want you there." And I really, we're working on some more stuff. So, speaking to worship leaders, teaching the cosmological argument and other things, and teaching how God being creative speaks to the fact that we are created to create. So that's one example. Another example, I was in Greensboro at a conference. It wasn't Kojic, but it was some denomination in that sort of framework.
Okay.
Talk about the church mothers, white gloves, all that, right? And
old school. Okay.
So once again, it's not a typical environment where the apologist gets invited, but once again, I've connected with some pastors there. It was a blessing to be there. And I had same white gloves during the Q&A asking questions. One lady approached me afterwards in a break and shared with me how her son had recently walked away from the faith because he was in college, and the professor was talking about some stuff, scientific evidence, this and that, and he could no longer reconcile Christianity with what he is learning. And based on what I had shared previously that day, she was like, thank you for that, because now I have kind of more ammo in my arsenal. Now, that blesses me and it hurts my heart at the same time. But here's the more important thing. What if I had it's not about me, but what if I had never shown up? Those questions, those struggles would still be happening, but they weren't bringing that to their pastor. When I was doing a Q&A with a high school after school program. They had questions. A lot of these kids are unchurched. It's all inner city youth. They had questions, and we provided a venue for them to safely ask those questions. But had we not done that, they would still have the questions. They just would not be asking them anywhere, and they'd be trying to figure it out on their own. They'd be going to Google and Wikipedia and whatever else. You know what I'm saying? Right. So the main issue, if I can just synthesize it, is we see 65% of our youth and young adults walking away from the faith as they get through college. That statistic is not going down, at least not very fast. No. And the most fearful part for me is that they're not walking away to other faiths. They're not walking away to other cults or whatever. They're walking away to nothing. And they will, and if you ask them, they'll tell you this. And there's a religious category, not even religious, I guess, but there's a category called nuns, N-O-N-E, religious nuns. That means they say we no longer affiliate with anything. That is a fast growing segment of our population in the West, especially. So I was talking with Adam. I was like, it's easy to identify the Hebrew Israelite. They got the garb. You see them. They're loud. It's easy to identify the, Kemetic. It's easy to identify some of these other people groups. So we know if you're that. Yeah. But when somebody walks out your church and turns to atheism, they just stop showing up. There's no garb. There's no fanfare. There's no nothing. You just don't see them anymore. So it's almost like this thing is growing, and because it's not loud, we don't see it, or we don't view it as a real thing, especially in the African American church. But it is a real thing.
Can I jump in with that right quick? Because when you said that the other day, I hadn't really thought about it, but I mean, it's an excellent point, though. I'm saying, like, you can visually see the shift, when somebody becomes a Hebrew Israelite. I'm saying they wear different clothes. Typically, it's the same. It's going to be something similar with Kemetics and Moors. I'm saying maybe slightly less so Kemetics, but it's going to be something similar with these other ethnocentric groups. But the Black atheists, I'm saying, and I'm being specific with that for a reason, because I think people are still under this old school impression that we don't get down like that. Yes, we do. I'm saying there's a growing African American atheist community. I'm saying I've been studying it like more so recently, giving more attention to it. And what I'm coming across is not only is it growing, but they're very intentional. I'm saying by they, I mean some of the institute or groups rather that they've established for themselves. I'm saying I was reading one group, and at their most recent meetings, they've been talking about targeting HBCUs. I'm saying holding meetings there, establishing chapters, so on and so forth. Like they're very intentional about how they're going to, how they intend to affect the culture. So like we really have to dispel, with this idea that like they just don't exist. And I'm be completely honest with you. As much as I love engaging all these other different groups, like we cannot sleep on Black atheism. It's like it's not a game. Like we can't keep acting like it doesn't exist. I'm saying we need to engage it. I'm saying in the same way that we are comfortable or intent, to engage these other groups, man. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just nodding along because it's Like I've seen it, and so I speak, you know, like nationally and even growing to internationally, and so Black, white, old, young, Hispanic, like I cover all of them. So for me, it's not the one target, but that also gives me a different insight that I think when we talk about purely urban apologetics, that it's not always there. Because in reality, people are people, bro. They could be white, Black, Chinese, what they are asking the same questions. I just got done watching a Q&A section. It was a team of RZIM speakers. They were speaking at some Asian American event. Same questions. Like, and you know, you've done enough Q&As. I heard Robbie say this one time. I can probably, before I go into an event, I can write down the 20 questions I'm going to get asked.
Yeah.
Like we know basically the questions.
Right.
And even if it's not exactly that question, it's going to flow back to some kind of issue of the moral argument or a central argument that you already know. So that part
about that, you mind if I chime in on that right quick? Because that's an interesting point. Yeah. Because when I first started doing urban apologetics, I didn't think that would be the case. I thought that when I started doing urban apologetics, that most of the questions that I would get from people after doing a presentation would relate to things like, you know, was Jesus based upon, you know, the myth of Horus, or, you know, the historical dynamic between Christianity and what happened with Africans during the transatlantic slave trade, kind of like more historically based questions. Yeah. But I'm telling you, as I've been traveling around, as I'm speaking, you know, that it still comes back to the same question, just like you're saying. Everybody really has the same question. It's going to come back to something to do with the moral argument, something to do with the problem of evil. You probably get something in there about, you know, how do we know that the Bible is true and things of that nature. But it really is the case. I mean, you know, people are really, for the most part, asking all the same questions with a few, you know, differences thrown in here and there. But, you know, people are people, like you said.
Yeah. And so I think on both sides now, and I don't know who all was watching, but whatever your ethnic background is, we have to realize that we have to major on the majors. So let's find where we agree. So, okay, there's Calvinism, Arminianism. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just saying those are two sides, but they both believe in God. They both believe in the centrality of the gospel of Christ. So let's start there. And then if we branch out, we branch out, but let's branch out internally. So what I don't like is Christians publicly debating on stuff that's not a major tenet of our theology. Because it's unnecessary and it causes confusion to people who are not in the family, so to speak. You know, some stuff you talk about in the household, right?
It's true.
Some stuff you don't. I just got invited, and we're trying to figure out a date and a location. An atheist reached out to me. He wants to do a debate, and I don't really debate because I don't feel it's the best method. But I called him. We talked on the phone for about an hour. He's a really nice guy. I think it actually would be a good one. So I'm considering this one. What hurts me is part of what got him. He was a Christian. Part of what got him veering in the other direction was he started reading Calvin, and it made him start thinking things. Then he started rereading his Bible, and eventually he slowly, and there was no one there to kind of reel him back. And so he went his own way. I had an opportunity to meet Bart Ehrman a month ago or 2 months ago.
And talk to the picture.
And talk to him a little bit. Nice guy. And so even as Christians, we got to stop talking about this dude like he's the devil. He probably knows his Bible better than most Christians. So let's get off this, like, just denigrate everybody bandwagon, and let's examine, because I believe that this truth that we believe in is so strong it can stand up to any test. What it really shows when we knock the person down, it becomes an ad hominem argument, and that really shows that you're not as confident in your position as you say you are.
True.
And that's not their problem, that's your problem. So for me, I'm like, okay, what is he saying? Is there any merit to it? And the crazy thing is, after he got done talking, he said, but nothing I said should cause you, if you are a Christian and want to believe one, stay one, nothing I said should make you stop being one. So even he admits that he simply is making a note or a career out of the fact that he's noticed certain discrepancies, scribal errors, whatever you want to call them. Okay, let's look at those. Let's see if they are what they are. But even at the end of that, does it take away completely the foundation of your faith? And the answer is no. So we don't. But this goes back to where we started. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to go get their master's or everyone has to go get trained, but I am saying, and I've been using this kind of like I don't know, slogan. Apologetics is not optional. That's not my opinion. That is what the Bible says. So even the people, the Christians who have said to me or said to others of us, right? I'm sure you've heard it, that we don't need this. We just need to let the Holy Spirit get them, right? We just they just need to come to church. They just need to read their Bible. Okay, let's say that's the case. If the word of God is the word of God, it's God breathed, then that means everything in it should be obeyed or adhered to, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the same text that they're talking about, it says that we should engage in apologetics. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be ready to give a defense. Right. Give an apologia. That's where it comes from. Peter, chief disciple. So we see all the scriptures in Paul that he reasoned, that they were trying to persuade, that we see all that in the text. Don't follow vain philosophies. So all of this is in that same text that you're saying that they just need to get in that text. But that text is going to tell them that you need to engage in apologetics. So it's a circular thing. Right. So we all need to step our game up.
Well, see, I agree. And that's the thing is, like, one thing I don't want to see happen, because what's happening it's a really exciting time to be an apologist. It's a really exciting time to be an urban apologist. You got people, got platforms coming up all the time. More people dropping stuff from their YouTube channel. It's really cool to see. You know what I'm saying? It's good to see the church responding. What I don't want to see is that those who maybe don't have the kind of time, or it's just not their thing to do something like start a podcast or whatever. Yeah, we don't want those folks to fall back and be like, let everybody else do it, like do the work. No, don't do it. The only reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because my hope is that I can give you something to learn from my podcast or this session right here, so that you can go use it, go out and do the work. That's the whole point. I'm just the funnel. That's all this is. That's all this is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I tell people all the time, it's I'm not like some super genius or something like that. It's not like I'm omniscient and I just sit around in my corner or in my room all day, just like dream up apologetic arguments. No, I read stuff, I study, and then I pass it on. You know what I'm saying? Because this thing has to become, it's a part of discipleship. That's really what it is. It's an aspect of discipleship. And I think part of the problem is that we take apologetics because it's so new to us, maybe, that we compartmentalize it somewhere else in our life, as opposed to understanding it as being part of the discipleship process. I'm saying you're coming to understand more about God, more about the world he created, more about how things work and how to articulate it to others. It's part of discipleship.
That is a great point. We got to do a whole nother show just on that. Right. Because I'm a huge believer in discipleship. The reason we left, part of the reason, I was at a church for a long time, a large church, and no animosity, no issues there, but we started a house church. And I've been in youth ministry, 15 years now, but we're huge believers in discipleship. Right. When I say discipleship, I mean life on life. Like I had kids spending the weekend, like they're here, they're part of the family. So that's the type of discipleship I see modeled by Jesus. Now, the reason I bring that up is I know as a grown folks, we can't really do that with every person.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But here's what is important about it is I believe the best way to engage in apologetics is relational. Mm-hmm. So for you, for me, for people that do this kind of full time, I love going to speak, but I also kind of sometimes don't, because when I get done, I can't disciple those people anymore. Right. So I hope I've left enough of the deposit with the pastor, with the church, so that they continue the conversation. But the best way, like you said, is I need to pull one or two close and let's talk this out. Let's walk through. And it's not going to be every question answered that day. It's a journey. Right. There's people that I've been discipling for years, in the faith and out the faith. And so they get to see not just the answers you give, but the life you live. And that's ultimately going to be the best apologetic, because you can say all the right answers, but if your life doesn't ultimately match it, they're still not going to vibe with it. So we have to engage relationally. But I think sometimes people are scared because they're like, well, what if they ask me this? What if they ask me this? But I think you actually have a better way to get off the hook in that situation. When you're up speaking, they assume you know everything. Right. But if you're relating to somebody, connecting with them, and you don't know, you be like, yo, I'll holler at you tomorrow. I'll get you the answer tomorrow. It's not that big a deal. Yeah. So I don't think it's anything to fear. I think it's actually a better situation for you.
Well, you know what, too, and I think it's actually like safer that way. If you are going to engage in public ministry as apologists or whatever, it is safer that way to make sure that you're in real relationship with other people. Now, for me, it's easy because, you know, I'm married. I'm saying, like, when I hop on here on lives and stuff, I'm Scott Lane to y'all. I'm Adam Coleman to y'all, the apologists. To my wife, I'm just Jarrell. You know what I'm saying? She calls me by my middle name. She don't even do the whole government name. She goes straight to that middle name. She calls me Jarrell. You know what I mean? So, you know, like I get home today, I know I got to do this live. I'm like, babe, I'm about to do this live at 5:30. She's like, all right, cool. Your son just pooped, you know, diaper. Go ahead, change that diaper, dog. Don't get nothing about, you know, I can have the dopest syllogisms and blog and whatever. She ain't worried about all that. You know what I'm saying? Real relationship. I'm saying if I'm getting big headed or whatever, if that were to be the case, I mean, fortunately, it hadn't happened yet. But if it were to be the case, I know my wife going to check me or my pastor. Now, I guarantee I put my next 5 paychecks on it, man. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a betting man. I'm just, you know, saying, like, if I say something crazy right now, I know my pastor's going to see it. One of them, somebody from the pastoral staff is going to see it, and they're going to check me when I see him at church tomorrow. But see, that's healthy, though. That's healthy. Man, you can't be out here being a lone ranger. And actually, even with apologetics, it's helpful to, you know, bounce ideas off each other and challenge each other and talk and, you know, and kind of just like sharpen, you know, iron sharpens iron. I'm saying it's so valuable, man. You know. So that being said, I know we was planning on being here for an hour, so I kind of want to transition to, you know, the next point we wanted to get to, which actually kind of goes along with what I just said. You know, you're a sharp brother, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, sometimes we just kick it, you know, in terms of apologetic stuff. And so anyway, you know, to kind of give a little context, taking a hard left here, give a little context. I was in New York a couple months ago. Matter of fact, for anybody who's been following me on my channel, you know what I'm saying, you know, I was in New York for the CIA conference, you know, for my conscious community, conspiracy theorists, no, I'm not in the CIA. And I'm not an agent. The CIA is an apologetics conference through Cross-Examined Ministries, just to clarify. Yeah, I don't even know what the CIA stands for, but I mean, I know it's Cross-Examined Ministries, you know what I'm saying?
Cross-Examined Instructors Academy.
They Cross-Examined Instructors Academy. It's a bunch of apologists get together and learn how to be better apologists. Anyway, I was in New York for that with Frank Turek. Shout out to him. Shout out to my man Jorge Gill. We had the whole squad: Vocab, David Wood, Sam Shaboon, John McCrae. We was all just out there wilding out. BK apologists. Anyway, Tim Fox. And so, you know, I was out there, and one of the things that we had the opportunity to do is give a presentation, you know, just to kind of so people could critique what you do and all that kind of stuff. And so I gave a presentation on a version of the moral argument for God's existence that really centers on human value. You know, so essentially the idea is that, you know, if God doesn't exist, then objective human value doesn't exist. But, you know, step 2, objective human value exists, therefore it follows that God exists. That's kind of like the basic version that I was presenting on. And so I was chopping it up with my man, you know, Alex, about a week or so before. And you was hitting on some dope points, man, as far as like, you know, revolving around that argument. So I just want to give you a chance to, you know, just dive into it a little bit. Just like share a little bit about that, man. Like, you know, I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I gave a talk last month at a conference, and it was kind of centered around this. And I'm looking at this comment from Devin.
Yeah, hilarious.
So I came up with this, and this is where the Holy Spirit and the apologists connect. I mean, they should always connect. But I was just thinking this through a couple of years ago, and basically it flows like this: that without value, there's no meaning. Without meaning, there's no hope. Okay. So part of my talk this last month, but I've been saying this for a couple of years now, is that the greatest issue facing humanity, the greatest disease facing humanity, is hopelessness. Hopelessness manifests itself in a variety of ways. It can manifest itself in the form of drug addiction. It manifests itself in the form of depression. It can manifest itself in the form of living a life that reeks of homelessness and hopelessness, and you end up living a life and doing things that hopeless people do.
Mm-hmm.
And it may seem as though you're having fun. That's why it's kind of hard to always see, because there's a lot of people in the world like, I ain't hopeless, but why are you doing the things you're doing? And what is it like when you lay your head on the pillow at night? So that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway.
No, that's a great point. I'm not going to get hung up on it, but yeah, you're right. Because sometimes in the moment, doing something out of hopelessness can momentarily feel pretty good. You know what I'm saying? It's like what that scripture says. Oh man, I'm gonna mess it up. Sin is fun for a season, but in it's destruction, that kind of thing. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so with this, not really a syllogism, but it's close, is that the springboard is value. Okay. So let's say, I always use this example. Let's say I go to the store. I play basketball, so I go to the store. I'm gonna get some new Kobe's, and they say it's $100, and I say, cool. If they would have said it's $1,000 for the shoes, I'm like, it's not worth that much.
Like, fam, he not even paying for what? I'm paying $1,000 for some Kobe's. He's like,
right.
Tired, dog. Like,
so,
yeah.
So as a purchaser, I am one half of the people that gets to determine or help determine the rate at which a product should be sold. Okay. Mm-hmm. We all are doing this. We just had Black Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So only two people can determine the value of a product, either the creator of that product or the purchaser of the product. Okay. Mm-hmm. So why is this important? Because only in a Christian worldview are the purchaser and the creator the same person. Mm-hmm. We've been redeemed. We've been bought back at a price by who? By our creator, which also means that only in a Christian worldview can we even begin to talk about such things as intrinsic human value, inherent self-worth. That means not self-referencing. Mm-hmm. That means reference from a transcendent source. Because here's the thing: in order for human value to be objective, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. it has to be given by something outside of humans. That would mean there has to be something or someone who transcends humanity. Nothing gives value to itself. I know we got a lot of self-important people in the world, but that's not how value works. Even the money in your pocket right now, I don't care if it has a 5 on it or 100. It's just a piece of paper until the government gives it value.
Right.
Value can never be self-ascribed. It must always be ascribed from an external source. Mm. The only external source viable or in a position, an objective position, to impute humans with value has to be God. If you remove God from that equation, then none of us has objective value. We have the value as much as we choose to give ourselves or as much as we choose to give other people. That may be pragmatically viable, but it's not objectively true. But the thing about it is everyone believes we have objective value. Mm-hmm. Even when people take life, they do so understanding that they have to hide it because they're doing something they know that is inherently wrong. Mm-hmm. And so this is where sometimes atheists will veer that, well, I don't know God, but I know right from I believe you. And the Bible believes you too. Romans chapter 2, 14 and 15 says the moral law is written on each of our hearts. God didn't leave it up to chance. So you can not know God and still know that murder is wrong. Let's go back even further. When Cain killed Abel, there was no law yet. It was still wrong to kill Abel. So for Christians, let's not make it where you need to know God so that you can be a better, more moral person. You should be better, but that's not really, I think, the best interest point with the argument. Mm-hmm. Nor is it completely accurate with what we're trying to say. Because there's a lot of atheists who are good people who do good things.
Right.
The point is this: it's not that you have to know God to be good. It's that such a thing as good cannot exist if such a person as God does not exist. That's the issue. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The thing that we talk about or classify as quote unquote good can't be an actual thing if there is no actual God. So I was writing something. I don't know if people on here are familiar with Euthyphro's dilemma.
Sure, yeah.
It's a false dilemma, but it basically goes like this. And Plato was kind of writing this about Socrates, his mentor, or with reference to him. So Euthyphro's dilemma is something good because God wills it, or does God will it because it's good? So if something is good because God wills it, then good becomes arbitrary. It's just whatever God wants to do, he just calls it good, but it might actually be bad. Okay. Or does God will it because it's good? Then that puts God in the subordinate position. I mean, that makes good supersede God, which means God becomes almost, non-essential.
Yeah.
But it's a false dilemma, right? There's a trilemma, and the trilemma part is usually left out. And Dr. William Lane Craig does a great job explaining this as well. The third option that was not included by Plato is God wills it because he is good. See, there has to be a foundation or a source in which to root goodness. And then once again, if we remove God from the equation, you're free to do that. But then you have to have something else better than God to put there. So back to the beginning, without value, which must always be ascribed externally, then life has no meaning. If Richard Dawkins is right, and we're just dancing to the tune of our DNA, right, what value is there in that? Like, we're just random sets of molecules, and okay, great. Then we have no more value than a tree. You can't get there. But if there's no value, then life has no meaning. And once you come to the conclusion life has no meaning, you live a hopeless life.
Man, that's tough. It's so many different directions we could go there, man. There's a lot of things I want to touch on. So I'm actually going to start with the last thing that you said, and I'm going to kind of work my way backwards because there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. It's a dope argument. I think it's a dope argument, and I think what I like about it, along with other versions of the moral argument and things along those lines, is that it takes apologetics and philosophy out of the abstract and brings it right down to the day-to-day how you live your life. You know what I'm saying? I could give you the cosmological argument. I could give you the teleological argument, a number of different arguments that, are fascinating, you know what I'm saying? And they may point to the existence of a God, you know what I'm saying, in very profound ways. Or there's various presuppositional arguments or Thomist arguments that will do the same thing. Yeah. But when you get to that moral argument, what I love about it is that it's going to hit you right where you live. I'm saying at the end of the day, when you come to that conclusion and the implications of it, I'm saying it's going to hit you right where you live. So, for example, and I'm actually end up doing a video on this, but a couple months ago, the discussion about reparations was really big, right? So you had Ta-Nehisi Coates, who was brought up to Capitol Hill, and he's written a bunch of stuff on his case for reparations, and so I guess he was and he was presenting along those lines. And so he's talking about justice. He's talking about, what ought to be done, for African Americans and descendants of slaves. He's making all these moral claims, right? What if you read his work, Ta-Nehisi Coates is an atheist. I'm saying, and the atheist in a very strong sense of that word. You know what I'm saying? And actually, I wish I had it right here in front of me, but I want to say it was in Between the World and Me, I believe it was, where he talks about how this is one quote where he says that he lived under the same fear that he imagines everybody else does, basically the fear of death. And he says, I knew that when they shatter the body, they shatter everything. I'm saying he's taking it that this physical body is all that there is to who we are, And he talks a great deal about hopelessness actually in his work. You know what I'm saying? Like if you listen to him talk, part of his understanding of what he calls Black atheism revolves around battling this grappling with despair. But that makes a whole lot of sense if you believe that this body is all that you are. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing beyond you, okay, to ground that personal worth, ground who you are and what you're worth. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's what you were going to. You said something about how value has to be ascribed. You know what I'm saying? We can give ourselves value. Of course, we can value ourselves. But when I think about, this argument, I think about the value for humans, the value for persons in a very robust sense. Okay. It's not, I can value myself all day. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to value me. Right. So if I value myself and nobody else does, let's make it real. I'm saying, so Africans valued themselves as persons prior to prior to, the transatlantic slave trade or being enslaved by other tribes on the continent, so on and so forth. Those who were free over in Africa, they valued themselves, right?
Yep.
But you had others, whether it be Africans who sold them into slavery to Europeans, or Europeans themselves, who valued those free Africans over there on the continent as not persons or human beings, but as cattle, right? Yep. So even though they had that value for themselves, without the corresponding value being conferred upon them by others, and others interacting with them at the level that they valued themselves, you end up with these moral atrocities like the transatlantic slave trade. We can say the same thing for Hitler and the Nazis. Obviously, they didn't value the Jews like they did themselves. You know what I'm saying? So it takes more than just you valuing yourself in order to get this transcendent value that's going to yield a moral framework. I'm saying that really is consistent. I'm saying, and coincides with our deepest intuitions about how we should be treated. You've got to look beyond ourselves for this value.
What's interesting about those two examples in particular, and those are not the only ones. We can look at the last century and the amount of atrocities committed by atheistic regimes in Russia and Mao Zedong and Pol Pot and everywhere else. But if you look at the language, this is why it's so interesting. Because I only have to give equal value to other humans. But if I consider you just cattle, then it's open season. If I consider the Jews to be dogs, so I have, in the terminology, they knew in order for me to be able to even bring myself to do these things, I have to, in my mind, reconcile that they are not of the same thing that I'm of.
Right.
Because in our minds, we can't fully reconcile how we can commit these atrocities on that scale, at least, to other humans. So we have to somehow in our mind reconcile how they're not fully human, or they're not the same as me, or they're, you know what I'm saying? Because if it's just an animal, I can do more to that, even though that's wrong too. But but look at the terminology, because it speaks to why they were even able to get that far into those situations.
And you're right, because that's very common in war. You know what I'm saying? Because I work with the federal government with veterans. You know what I'm saying? That's what I do during my day job. You know what I mean? And I can tell you what era you served in based upon the vernacular that you use, particularly the vernacular that you use to describe those that you were fighting against. You know what I'm saying? If you use the word insurgent, I know that you probably didn't serve in the Vietnam War. You know what I'm saying? You probably didn't serve in like the Korean. If you use the term insurgent, you know what I'm saying? If you say something like raghead, well, I know you're not talking about Vietnam, so I'm going to be able to locate somewhere where you're, where you served. You see what I'm saying? Now, if you say something about, and excuse me for for these terms, but I'm trying to illustrate a point. But if you use terms like remember Gran Torino, for anybody who's seen that, he's referring to like dragon ladies and gooks and things like that. All these disparaging terms. I'm saying if I didn't know anything about him, and I just knew that he served in the military and that he was using those terms to describe a particular group in terms of who he fought against, I'm going to be able to understand, when or where he probably served. You know what I'm saying? So my whole point is, in war, we do that all the time. You know what I'm saying? We find terms, because the average person, this is something really wrong with you, can't just take a life. Even if somebody who's dressed in military gear different than yours, the average person, this is something probably wrong with you. You know what I'm saying? You're not just going to be able to shoot somebody. You know what I'm saying? That's just not how it works. Yeah, shout out to social workers, bitch, as well. Shout out. That's what's up. But yeah, and so, so you're right. We have to, in order to treat somebody, in such a heinous manner, you've got to, in your mind, some kind of way. And I will say most often, I think it's fair to say most often by use of vernacular, you've got to bring them down a notch in terms of how you view that person. You can't see them as being your equal. I'm saying, because then you treat them that way. You see what I'm saying? And so it's fascinating, man. I mean, but you're right, and that goes back to the value issue. How do we value one?
Yeah, that's good. Yes, sir.
Yeah, man, that's powerful, man. So again, and as a matter of fact, I'm posting stuff in the chat. I wrote an article called "Black Lives Don't Matter," where I actually address this issue here. You know what I'm saying? And my whole argument really is that if there is no God and matter is all there is, then no lives matter. You know what I'm saying? If all there is matter, no lives matter. You know what I'm saying? So people think about, you know, the types of movements, you know, justice related movements are making these moral claims, right? Like Black Lives Matter. You know, so much of it seems that what they stand for, from what I understand, certainly doesn't coincide with the Christian worldview. There's no doubt about that. You know what I mean? But if they want to boot God out of the picture, you know, in any way, shape, or form, they're also going to pull the rug from under the very moral claims upon which their movement stands in the first place. You know?
There's a lot of and this is why we all have to be kind of junior apologists, because at some point, and I tell people this all the time, especially when you're talking to a lot of atheists, not all of them, but at some point in their talk or in their conversation, they're going to make a self-refuting statement. You just have to spot it. And so, for example, they'll say something like, God was wrong for this. Okay. So you're basically saying, like, God exists and I hate him. Which one you want to pick here? Like, either you're atheist and he doesn't exist, or you're just judging him for being immoral, but he is the source from which morality must flow if he does exist. Mm-hmm. So it's possible then we maybe with our finite minds need to reassess, maybe he knows something we don't know, or maybe he thinks a little wiser than we think, and then go from that more humble standpoint and say, let me try to figure this out. But to say, so I'm writing a paper right now about how evil proves the existence of God, not disproves. Mm-hmm. And so taking a little bit from C.S. Lewis and a lot from several other places, even from Calvin and from Pascal, I was reading some of his works as well. And the way that this can be sometimes become self-refuting, because the biggest issue, like I said, we talk about those 20 questions, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to get a question about evil, pain, and suffering.
Oh, right? Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, and all of those are connected, and it's really out. Humbly and honestly, it is one of the toughest questions for me to answer, not intellectually, but it's tough because usually whoever's asking it is asking it on the heels of some kind of pain or suffering or in the process thereof. And so and this is where my pastor's heart comes back in, that first, and I'll take a lot of those. I'm like, hey, let's talk afterwards, because I don't want to just make this all about the head. You know, I want to be able to hug you and say what I got to say. But the head part, the intellectual part, is very kind of succinct. And it goes like this, that most things, at least objective things, exist through their opposite. So we know what left is because we know what right is. We know what up is because we know what down is, right? So whenever you say that there is such a thing as objective evil, most people are ready to agree on that part. We all agree murder is wrong, rape is wrong, okay?
Yeah.
Atheist, Christian, Buddhist, we all agree on that. Okay, fine. If there is an objective evil, you're presupposing that there is such a thing as objective good. If you're presupposing that, then you also are presupposing that there is a moral law in existence by which we can differentiate between the good and evil. But if you do that, you have to include the moral lawgiver, who is God, because you can't have a random law. Once again, it has to come from some source. So we're right back where we started. But what they will often do is simply say, this is evil. There can't be God because this is evil, or this is God's evil, or whatever. But you have to look at the totality of the argument, or look at what's not being said, but actually is being said. So C.S. Lewis said, and I was trying to find out where this quote is from today, but C.S. Lewis said, the shadow proves the sunshine. So you can have a sunshine with no shadow, but you can never have a shadow with no sunshine or light, right? Frank Turek says it like this: if you take the rust out of the car, you have a better car. If you take the car out of the rust, you have nothing. So I say it like this: evil is essentially good gone bad. It is aberration of the perfection. The perfection is good. That's the starting point. The only way we know what evil is because it is so far from the starting point. But that presupposes there is a starting point. So this is why we have to work through these philosophical understandings, because then we can understand, okay, this is objectively evil, but there is an objective good. So let me get better in tune with the source of that objective good. And if humanity did that, we would see a huge decline in evil. We would see people come into Christ. We would see things in this world begin to shift. But if we only want to argue from one side of the equation, we're never going to reach the destination.
Yeah, and it's very interesting what you said. So I agree, because, one move that people will make would be to say something like, okay, well, yeah, maybe we don't need a lawgiver. You mean like certain laws, like the law of gravity, that's just a description of how things are. It doesn't have a lawgiver, or the law of lift or something like that. Like these certain mathematical or, laws of physics. And I think that's because they fundamentally, there's a fundamental difference between those kinds of laws that are descriptive versus the moral law, which you're talking about, which is prescriptive. I'm saying descriptive laws simply describe something that's occurring or will likely occur, right?
Yeah.
Prescriptive laws, as in moral oughts, things that you ought to do or ought not to do, that's not necessarily about what is occurring. It's about what should happen, right? And then it becomes, okay, well, how do you have that should? If something should happen, you know what I'm saying, then that points to there being some intentions, I'm saying, behind the moral law. There's somebody who intends for things to go a certain way in terms of, with respect to how we treat one another, what we do in the world, right? It's pretty hard to have intentions without there being some sort of mind behind it. I don't know how something mindless, can have intentions, unless you want to talk about robots, but then they were created by things that do have minds. So anyway, it's interesting. It's a very poor understanding, I think, of intentionality. You know what I'm saying? It suggests that you can have intentions without there being a mind of some sort that has something to say about what we do or what we don't do. But then the other side is too, some people will say, well, maybe there isn't an objective morality. Maybe it's just all subjective. It's whatever you believe, or whatever we agree upon corporately, collectively, that's what it is. I think you run into problems with that as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna say something controversial. This may sound crazy. So I'm just gonna preface it by saying that it sounds crazy. I guarantee you somebody's gonna take me out of context, when when I say this, and probably create some meme or video about it. But if you think about it, if atheism, and by atheism I mean like in a really strong sense, like something like naturalism, God doesn't exist, and the only thing we have is the natural world. And let's say that they also couple that with this notion that, okay, well, whatever is best for the majority or whatever the collective agrees on, that's what's good, and that's the kind of subjective good we ought to be abiding by. Well, if that's true, then slavery was right. Slavery, it was right to enslave Africans. If that model of morality is true, what I'm saying? Because when you think about it, African Americans, we're like, if we were our own nation, we would be the wealthiest African nation in the world. You know what I'm saying? So those descendants of slaves, turned out relatively good as compared to some other people in the world. America is balling out of control right now, at least materially. You know what I'm saying? We give a bunch of aid. We do a lot of things, worldwide. I mean, America does a lot of good. So, well, I mean, I guess that slave labor went to good use. If I were an atheist, if I were a nationalist, being African American, I would have to say that on balance, maybe some good came out of slavery. I'm saying, but clearly that's wrong. Obviously that's wrong. Obviously it's wrong. No matter what kind of gains come down the road, clearly anybody who's thinking clearly understands that it's wrong to subjugate and brutalize people for the sake of any sort of gain. And that's absolutely, unnecessary, unjustifiably so. You see what I'm saying? So that's my whole point. So these worldviews matter. Your framework of morality matters. Now, in the Christian worldview, there is no justification, what I'm saying, for the transatlantic slave trade. You ought not to treat people as if they're animals. That's just, we're all made in the image of God. You know what I'm saying? But when you abandon that, and you take on some of these other ways of understanding morality that are ultimately false, then you end up with these terrible conclusions, you know what I'm saying, that don't jive with our deepest intuitions. We know it ain't right, you know what I'm saying, to get over on people and treat them like, like livestock. You know what I'm saying? But if you follow some of these worldviews and models morality to their logical conclusion, you have to concede that. You know what I'm saying?
You do.
That something's wrong with the worldview. If you have to concede that should tell you that something's wrong.
And I think what you said is a point where some people jump off, because they'll say, they don't take it to the logical conclusion of the worldview. They take it to their own logical conclusion. So they're like, I'm not going to do that. I would never do that. I would never kill somebody. I would never. Okay. But if morality is not objective and it's just, your truth is your truth, all this type of stuff, are you willing to concede that to the other 7 billion people on the planet? See, like, you can't have it just for you and your moral standard is good and you're good and you're a good person. You may be. But if that's the way morality is determined, are you willing to concede that standard to everybody else, to the Hitlers of the world, to the slave trade? Like, are you willing to concede that? And my answer would be, you probably aren't. The funny thing, don't do this, y'all. Don't do this. When somebody says that there is no morality, it's just all a matter of opinion, just slap them. Just kidding. Because everybody believes it's wrong for you to do something to them. It's always wrong. It's always evil for you to do something hurtful to me. I don't care about all these other people, but if you do it to me, it's evil, right? So people, they're not thinking it all the way. Some people aren't thinking it all the way through. That either there is one uniform objective moral standard, or it's all subjective. That's the choices. Right. If it's all subjective, just be understanding that you're conceding the same, not just the same standard, but the same ability, or I should say, you're assuming that everyone on the earth has the same ability to properly determine right from wrong. Right. Some people might just be a little off.
Well, a lot of people are. I can tell you. I'm telling you, there's a lot of people, more than you might think. That's a little bit off. I'm telling you.
I believe it, man.
But now check this. It's something that just occurred to me too. So, like, another thing is too, if your model for morality is not grounded in, if it doesn't flow from the biblical worldview, and the reason why I phrase it that way is because I believe the biblical worldview is true. I think it's the most coherent, consistent way to look at the world. And when you get off from that, then you start running into problems. Now, with respect to morality, one of the problems I think you run into when you diverge from the biblical worldview is that, like, now, remember back in the day, I don't know if you were a video gamer. I was a video game guy back in the day. Okay. Now, you used to be able to do things. Well, I guess you still can, like on Madden or NBA 2K, you can create a player, right? Now, I don't know how they do it now, but it used to be you would have so many points that you could put in one area, like speed or agility or strength, stuff like that. But if you put more in one category, you had to take away from it in another category. So you couldn't have a guy who was 100% strong, 100% fast, and 100% in all the categories. Maybe they don't do it that way now, but that's how it used to be. Or, I'm about to go super nerd right here, but, our RPGs, I'm saying, like, Final Fantasy and, some of the old Zelda joints, it was the same way. I'm saying there's going to be a trade-off in terms of how you could attribute points, to your character. You strengthen them in one area, but it's going to lower them in the other. Now, it's the same way when it comes to moral frameworks. Okay. Now, from the biblical perspective, I've really, shout out to my man, Tim Stratton, because I've been thinking more about this. But there's a particular way to understand what you were talking about earlier in terms of God being the foundation of good. It's called purpose theory. And, theologians and philosophers look at that and understand the relation between, God and goodness. They are one and the same, but how that plays out, there's a particular way of looking at that called purpose theory. I'm not going to get into it right now. But one of the outworkings of that is that, God is love. We see that in scripture. And when we look at the world that he created, the interaction between people or in his creation hinge upon love. They ought to, love should be the fuel of our interaction between one another and between us and the world that God created and between us and him. That's his nature, and it should be flowing through us throughout all creation. So that's the fuel, like I said, behind what our interaction should be. Now, if you start diverging from the biblical worldview and you get into things like certain types of subjective morality, right, then what happens is love is no longer the means or the mechanism by which we interact with one another. You start to see a degrading of that, a lowering of that, and you see an increase in other things. Like it becomes replaced with things like power. Yep. You know what I'm saying? So, we begin to no longer deal with each other on the basis of love, we deal with each other on the basis of power. So, for example, if there is no real objective morality, then really, in terms of who achieves what in the world and who does what, it becomes, what do you have the ability to do? You know what I'm saying? Some people have the ability to oppress other people. Mm-hmm. Some people like Hitler. I'll use that example again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he offed himself. Now, maybe he would have got killed eventually, or maybe he would have escaped. We don't know. But for the time that he was out there, getting it out there in Germany, he had the power to exterminate 6 million Jews. And he did it. You know what I'm saying? So that the power, the ability to achieve one's ends became the means by which he interacted with other people. Same thing with slavery. You know what I'm saying? People don't like to hear it, but the reality is most people haven't done the history on racism in terms of how it's progressed over time. Like when we talk about like how the transatlantic slave trade kicked off, at least here in the Western world, it wasn't like white people were like, yo, we hate those Africans over there. Let's go get them and enslave them. No, it was like, look, we're trying to get this money. We're trying to get this money. We want to have these crops go to where we want them to go, and we have the power to go enslave these other people. So we're gonna go ahead and grab them up, buy them up, whatever, bring them over here, and by the power that we have, we're gonna impose ourselves on them to continue to work for us for free. That's what happened. They had the power to do it, and they did it. You see what I'm saying? So again, what happens is when you start diverging from the biblical worldview in terms of how to properly understand morality, what you do is you begin to replace that love component of how we're supposed to interact with each other with something else like power or shame. Sometimes people get things they want out of people by shaming them. There's a number of different things, but love gets replaced, you know what I'm saying? And it becomes, it gets with something else like power, these other features of how we interact with one another. And ultimately it's going to end up in an unhealthy way and produce more sin, more violations of one another and so forth.
Yep. Yeah. I'll just add one thing to that. I know we gotta go, but
we had to go.
So the other thing I speak a lot about, and actually the thing I really started with that I speak most about, that I write most about, I write a blog called relentlesspursuitofpurpose.com. And my ultimate goal is to get everybody to know their God-given purpose. Yeah. I had an opportunity a couple months ago to give a TED Talk, and it was basically partially on that. Now I had to backdoor into some things because, you can't say everything on that stage, but
okay.
So apologetics for me is a means to an end because I got to get you to know God so that we can get to the step. Now, I was doing a Q&A, one of the ones I referenced earlier with these high school kids a month or so ago. And somebody asked a question, I think it was regarding the LGBT issue in some way, shape, or form, which we're not going to get into right now. But one of my responses, one of my responses was, they said something. I said, okay, but that depends on what is the purpose for life. And I said, what is the purpose for life? Until we answer that question, we can never determine what action is right or wrong. When Dr. Miles Monroe said this, when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. When you do not know the purpose for something, you will abuse that thing. I give this example a lot of times when I speak about, I was trying to change a battery in one of my kids' toys, and I didn't feel like going downstairs to get the screwdriver. And I used a butter knife. Now it worked, but that's not what it was intended for. Right. And what I didn't say is that the butter knife slipped out several times. It wasn't ergonomically designed for my hand. Like it wasn't designed to do that thing. And I abuse it. Now, I don't have time to go to my old testimony, but I didn't know the purpose for my own life. And I abused my life for a lot of years, drugs, alcohol, and other things. It wasn't until I'd understood and discovered the purpose for my life that things began to shift and I began to live with purpose. So I tell everybody, you're created on purpose with a purpose, but that's only true if there's a creator, right? Yeah. So back to where you started, if we can't get clarity on the purpose for life, and I believe that, as you said, the Christian worldview provides us the best clarity and the best perspective on what the purpose of life is, which very simply put is to know Christ and make him known. If that's the purpose, then everything I should do should in some way, shape, or form augment that purpose or fulfill that purpose. But if I don't know the purpose for life, going back to the hopeless, I just do whatever. And that ultimately leads to hopelessness, because this world thinks that freedom means no boundaries. That's not true. I think I have a quote by either Tim Keller or JP Morgan, one of those guys. He said, if you free a fish from the boundaries of water, you're not freeing it, you're killing it.
Oh, wow.
When you and I, when we watch basketball or football and they make the buzzer beater shot, or they have the toe tapping catch on the sidelines, it's exciting precisely because there's a boundary. Vince Vitale at RZIM talks about this a lot. He said, it is the rules of a game that provide us the freedom to enjoy it in a meaningful way. It's because we know the start, the finish, the objective, and the rules that makes it meaningful. So taking all the boundaries out of life, I can be whatever I want to be. I'm just going to leave that there. You know, all the stuff we're getting into is because we don't know the ultimate purpose for life. And like you said, once you remove the central purpose, you have to make one up. And we're not good at that.
Right. I just put a quote up on the screen of Brother Askia Jones said the same thing you were saying. He's talking about how people run from God's sovereignty. Oh, wait, actually, I put the wrong one up. Oops. Or wait. Yeah, I definitely put up the wrong one. But but earlier he said, I'm going to mess it up now. Oh, let me see if I can find. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Boom. He's saying that people many times don't have a problem with God or creator, but the biggest issue they have is sovereignty. You know what I'm saying? They don't want somebody being in charge. Yeah. And I think it's because, getting at your point, I know we got to go, but it's because they misunderstand the role that rules play in reality. You know what I'm saying? They misunderstand it, and therefore they buck against it. But you're right. If you don't know the objective of the game, you don't know the rules of the game, it's pretty hard to enjoy the game, let alone win. It's pretty difficult. And I think that, that really, again, that's why I love this argument, because it gets back around to our everyday life that really affects, like, how are we living as individuals? Like, are you living every day, looking at every day through the lens of who God made you to be and what he made you for?
Right.
If not, then inevitably you will engage in things and spend your time in ways, spend your money in ways, get involved with people in ways that are outside of what he intended you to do, and is going to produce friction. It's going to produce, undesirable outcomes. I'll put it that way. And it's going to lead to hopelessness. That's what it's going to do. You're going to be that prodigal son, out there, eating with the hogs. That's what happens when you shirk off God's reign in your life. That's Jesus he's our friend, all that kind of stuff, but he's Lord. I'm saying he's not coming just to be your buddy. Jesus is Lord. I'm saying, and if you're going to properly relate to him, if you're going to be reconciled to him, the door through which you do that, you got to recognize who he is and the role that he is to play in your life and in the world in general. You see what I'm saying? So, man, I know we got to get out of here, man. I love conversations like these, man. It's crazy. Matter of fact, right at the towards the end of the day, I was just randomly listening to some Kirk Franklin stuff, and his song "First Love" came on, and it's about basically people who have walked away from Christ. You know what I'm saying, and kind of gotten going a bad direction and coming back home. Basically, is what it's about. You know what I'm saying? And it's wild because I hadn't heard that song in a long time, but I remember, 6 or so years ago when I was working this overtime gig, and I just started getting into apologetics, and I was really feeling like God wanted me to start doing it. I would just listen to that song over and over again, and I just imagined myself, with the podcast and getting on YouTube and writing articles and doing these different things, and people, coming back to Christ, and people who had walked away coming back home. You know what I'm saying? And it's so wild because it just happened to come on today. And I'm like, man, it was like a while ago, but like now I'm doing it. Like, God is working through this ministry to bring people back to Christ. You know what I'm saying? And to go back to that purpose, the thing for which they were made. You know what I'm saying? The reason for which they were made. And I just think it's so he was able to end that point, man. So if that's you out there, if you just happen to be, watching, however you came across this podcast, I don't even normally give a call to Christ. So maybe I need to do it more often. But these conversations are not just so we can, spout off random philosophical theories or sound smart. This is really about, what my man Alex was talking about. This is about people coming to know Christ. This is about people coming to a relationship with him and living according to the way that he created us to do. And that only happens through the cross, through acknowledging him as Lord, confessing that he rose from the grave, man. You know what I'm saying? That's repenting. It comes through repentance, So if you have any questions about that, I just feel, led. And I feel compelled to do this, right now. Hit me up. I'm gonna put my email in the chat right now. Tru-ID Tru-ID TRUID 07 at gmail.com. So I'm putting it in the chat right now for anybody who wants to hit me up and maybe wants to take that step. This is like literally the first time I've ever done that. I don't mean this to be gimmicky in any sort of way. I just feel compelled to do that right now. So if you want to hit me up, I can help to answer any questions I can, and get you to a local church too, where you can continue to be discipled. So, but with that being said, Alex, man, you want to any last words, man, or maybe not last words? It sounds kind of ominous, but you want to share some things before we get off the air?
No, man, I could do this all day. So okay. Let me hold back. But
I just want to say I appreciate you coming on, man. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Let people know where they can access your stuff, and I know you're on Facebook. Oh, yeah. I let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, go. My website is Alex R. McElroy McElroy.com. I don't know if I can put it in there or not, but I don't know. Maybe you can put it in. I can't type it. It's not.
Okay, you said Alex.
Alex R. McElroy McElroy.com. And then Twitter and Instagram is Alex R. McElroy. Facebook, just my name, Alex. So yeah, find me wherever. Feel free to message me as well. Oh, let me say this too. If there's any pastors or any people, any churches watching this right now, we provide workshops, apologetics workshops that churches host. So go to my website, message me, and if you guys want to come, we come. We bring the content. We'll do Q&A. We just want to be a resource to the ministry or organization. So please hit me up on that. My calendar is booking up a lot for the first half of next year. So get in there quick. But and I do a conference every year called The Proof for the Truth. So keep an eye out for that. We're solidifying the date for that now.
Cool, man. My man Matt Jackson, MJ Jackson said he called you A-Mac. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So that's funny. My mentor called me that too.
Oh, for real? Oh, hey, it's gonna stick now, brother. You rolling out. You know what I'm saying? So everybody, I just want to make sure I say thank you to everybody who came through, with the super chats. I think my brother Devin and Eskia as well came through with the super chat. Much love to y'all. We appreciate it for sure. You know what I'm saying? It helps me to keep doing what I'm doing, quite frankly. You know what I'm saying? No gimmick. That's real rap. So what up, D Noob, MJ Jackson? I'm not sure if I shout out my man Nate. I want to catch everybody that I miss. But love y'all, man. Tomorrow night, I'm gonna be on the BK Apologist channel. You know what I'm saying? If you haven't subscribed to him, make sure you subscribe to his channel. I'm gonna be on the BK Apologist channel. We're gonna be doing our next segment of the breakdowns from the debate between Vince Bantu and the brother Jabari. So you definitely want to tune in for that. Shout out to my man BK Apologist. Definitely hit my man Alex McElroy up on all of his sites. The brother is a great speaker, great teacher, sharp guy, man. Sharp guy. I love, chopping up with him on the phone, all that kind of stuff. So, y'all gonna see us doing a lot of stuff, coming up. I'm just leave it at that. But, we got some stuff doing. I'm just gonna leave that right there. You know what I'm saying? But shout out to you guys, man. Thank you for coming on. And to everybody, as always, love God, love people, and take care of the things that God blesses you with. Love y'all, man.
Love you too. Peace.